So I guess we can actually, in this case, get started with talking about what's going on, like
Sure.
right now. And I'm trying to keep this super, like sometimes we'll talk about how did you start? And in this case, it's cool to get like on the ground running because as you mentioned, as we were off air just a little bit while back, you say that like you were super busy with projects and stuff. So like, before, first, thank you for being on this little improvised show of the DNA of music in quarantine with musicians from all over the world at their homes trying to caught to their pants down, so to speak. So now having to be creative and improvise. So how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Yeah. So you're so we're so professional and so nice. Yeah. Oh, but so you are. So you said like you were, of course, lots of gigs canceled and everything, and you were in Toronto, and you were, of course, one of the most active and most entrepreneurial like world music people that I know. So it was cool to like check with you and see how you were dealing with this sort of like this first responders of world music trying to help the community and everything.
Love it.
So yeah. So how's it going there?
So like you said, all my gigs are canceled, like local gigs, from like So Far and Artery to like Kerner Hall gigs to I was supposed to tour. I was supposed to go to South Korea actually. Seoul Music Week, that's postponed. We'll see. I was supposed to go to Europe with Dimitri actually in June and July. We're going to do Wales and Barcelona with like an electronic project that we have.
Oh, okay.
And then that's canceled. And then I was supposed to go to like Houston and Washington, D.C. with another band called Jaffa. So everything is just canceled. And all my kids, like teaching classes, everything, schools, obviously. So everything got canceled at least until July.
You're right.
So, yeah. So, except for some of my classes at the Academy of Spanish Dance went online. So it's like a reduced fee because it's online. But so I'm still teaching like a few classes a week there. And even the kids on Zoom, like I teach a bunch of little kids. So I'm like, oh, they're like, yeah, they're so funny. Then they're so focused. I thought they were going to be a disaster on Zoom, but they're like kind of more focused on Zoom than they are in the classroom, which is a surprise.
It's unprecedented whatever is going on now. Like if you can see the silver lining, it's a lot of people that were like, for musicians that I see like they're shy or I don't have an online presence, I just do gigs. Suddenly everybody's doing lives, everybody's trying to do teaching online and actually taking the 30 minutes to learn the tools to do it. So it's really cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. So I'm teaching some singing. I have a private student also that I do dance, like shawl manton with. So I'm doing some teaching online, which is cool. But then also I started a program called Urgnt.ca.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So with other members of the community, Mark from Lemon Bucket and Josh also from Lemon Bucket. And they were also both in Ventanas originally when I founded it. And also head of productions is Kathleen Ryan, who works with the Junos and iHeartRadio and other amazing things. And also Oksana doing design. So really the five of us it started also with Alex Bordokis, but he has a venue that he's still dealing with. So he couldn't really stick around. But so we started it like to just try and gather funds and pay artists for online streaming. And I think we were kind of like for the first wave of people that were doing it. So we did a GoFundMe campaign. So far we've raised around $16,000.
Oh, that's great.
We're doing our 7th and 8th show this Friday, hip hop special.
What up?
And yeah. So we're doing like GTA artists for now. Hopefully if we get more funding and we can do more, then we'll do like, I mean, the world is the limit with the internet right now, right? So we could do Canadians or, Toronto musicians stuck abroad, just saying. Or we could do an international. But for now, we're doing local, and we started in empty venues, like doing shows in empty venues.
Yes.
Which is pretty amazing to no audience. I mean, to a worldwide audience, but no physical audience. And we did 2 shows, Misha Brugger Grossman and Mosquito Bar.
Yes.
But then, of course, with the new health protocols, we had to stop doing that. But we've had, some support and shout outs from the union, Toronto Musicians Association 149, and the City of Toronto Music Office, and Toronto Arts Council have all kind of put the word out and helped us make the call out for musicians. So that's pretty amazing. And then we'll see how that goes. It's been like so much work and and a learning curve, because now we're on the other side, right? I'm no longer a musician applying for something. I am like accepting applications, and that is like a whole other world that it's really interesting, but it's difficult to like develop a smooth, streamlined process that is like easy for everybody and takes everyone into consideration, but is efficient. So it's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, but like from what I saw, like from afar, what you guys were doing there, like, and I know that both you and Mark are very like entrepreneurial, and I know basically all the people that are involved in this. It's like you guys make it happen, and I really liked and having the like GoFundMe and trying to get like a bigger, like more like corporate sponsors for things, instead of just being, oh, the end is nigh, oh my God, what are we gonna do? You guys are trying to do something. We're gonna have links here and everywhere, I guess, to get
here
this.
Here.
Yeah, like I think it's the most, and like not only having like, oh, pay attention to me, like it's like, oh, let's see how we can arrange something for local artists to have like even a global reach. And I think it would be a cool learning curve, even for you to have this opportunity of curating content and dealing with
that's crazy
egos, technology, and learning everything on the way. But I think that's, from what I know from you, it's something that like you are no stranger to like learning things on the go and taking advantage of whatever is going on and trying to do. So let's talk for the people that don't.
You always have to say yes.
Let's go back a little bit. So we introduced a few things. You're a dancer, you're a singer, you're a band leader, you were doing teaching and teaching both like singing and dancing and all sorts of things. So let's go a little bit back and talk a little bit, basically with the flamenco hands. People have jazz hands, people have flamenco hands. And I'm trying not to touch my face also, because supposedly we're not supposed to touch my face. Yeah, and then me talking to Demetrius, the previous guest, I was like this the whole time.
Oh no.
Anyway, but that's segue. So let's talk a little bit about like what, like you. So tell a little bit about like what you do and like how you started, like what's before the pandemic and the zombies took place, what were you up to?
Sure. I mean, I was kind of up to the same thing, music and arts, right? Music and dance, just obviously not in my house, around the whole world. So you've interviewed my mom before, Dr. Judith Cohen, in the past, in a previous podcast. Link. No.
It was a very cool conversation, and it's one of the most downloaded. Awesome. Like people just keep finding it on Google. It's really funny.
Oh, it's so amazing. I'm gonna tell her
really
that.
Cool. Yeah, it's really
cool. I want to do like a whole podcast series on her. It'd be so crazy, and her life would be nuts. But anyways, okay, that's for another time. So I grew up with her. She's an ethnomusicologist, and I grew up singing and traveling and accompanying her on her fieldwork research all throughout the Mediterranean, like all around the Mediterranean. So the Balkans, Greece, Turkey, Israel, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Morocco, all those places since I was like 4 or 5 years old. And then I started recording with her when I was around 5. It was on all her albums, when I was 5, 8, 14, 19 kind of thing. And then I was like, I want to be normal and not do this. I'm going to work 9 to 5, get a real job, have a car, all these things, right? Because most of my family, like my cousins and my aunts and uncles and stuff, they all lived in the suburbs. They had 2 cars, all these things. And I was like, I want that life. I don't want to sleep on floors and bus stations and hitchhike anymore in random mountain villages. And at the same time, I started dancing flamenco when I was like 7 here in Toronto, because I saw a dancer called Esmeralda Enrique dance. And I was like, I want to do that. And my mom was like, go talk to her. So I did. So simultaneously, like parallel, I was dancing flamenco in Toronto and going to Spain and Europe, but a lot of Spain and Portugal, to gather old traditional songs in the villages with my mom, and then sing and perform them in festivals, like medieval festivals or things like that around Spain. So, and I was learning Spanish. I learned Spanish and Portuguese just from traveling. Anyways, then, long story short, sort of, after I spent 3rd year of university, I should say that in order to be normal, I decided to do a degree in biology at the University of Toronto. So I loved science, I loved math, I loved my biology teacher in high school. And so I went to U of T and I majored in biology and minored in Spanish to get honors, easy minor. And yeah, I did 4 years of biology, which really, I think, kind of changed the way that I think about the world.
Yes.
I'm always thinking about, how, like, why things are happening from a biological perspective instead of just only a human or a political perspective, but like the greater, like the pandemic right now. To me, it's very interesting. I haven't done any research or drawn any lines. It's just like an interesting coincidence in my mind that just when we were saying, oh, climate change, like we need to stop everything or else, suddenly we have to stop everything. You know what I mean? Like that is fascinating to me. And when I go outside on my balcony, like last night, I went outside and all the lights of all the buildings were like crystal clear. Like I got, new glasses or something, and I don't wear glasses. But I was like, what's happening? And the air is actually getting cleaner. So like that kind of thing is very interesting to me, and the why and wherefore of like population increase and decrease and all these things, I think of more of like from a biological perspective. So really train my mind in a certain way to think about the world differently. So that was the biggest, effect of doing that. But then third year of university, I went to Barcelona to study, did an exchange there. And at a flamenco dance school that I was going to, Latani, I'd go every day for like multiple hours a day. And then I'd go to a squat community and practice afterwards. And in that year there, the husband of my teacher said, oh, you sing like Sephardic music and all this stuff. Why don't you take a singing workshop with my sister? And his sister was a famous flamenco singer, Montse Cortez. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's amazing. And so I started singing flamenco there. So I'd been dancing all my life. I'd been singing other things. I spoke Spanish, so it kind of fit that I should start singing flamenco. When I came back to Toronto around 2007, I think, there were really, at the time, there had been singers here in the past, but at the time, there was no active flamenco singer in the community, really. So people were doing shows with just dance and guitar, with the missing link of singing, which is very strange in flamenco.
Oh, yeah.
So they would, yeah. It's like, what are you dancing to? Like, anyway, it's a strange thing. In Spain, that would never happen. They would drop the dance before they would drop the singing, right? But here people want to see the dance anyway. So people were like, oh, Tamar, can you sing for us? Because there's no singers, flamenco singers. So I started really becoming like a flamenco singer. And then later I went back to Seville in Spain, and I went for a year of training at an academy of, flamenco academy, Fundación Cristina Jeren in Seville. And I did like 9 to 5, for a year at a flamenco school. Believe it or not, 9 o'clock flamenco is like not a good idea.
Anything 9 o'clock.
Especially because the teachers like encourage you to go partying. They're like, real flamenco happens in the middle of the night. You have to go in the street and party, and then you have to show up in class at 9 and be like, hey. And you're like, oh my God. Anyway, then I went back and forth. It was like, yeah, it's crazy. And then I went back and forth like a few times to Seville for a few months after that, and studied with different teachers, and Rocío Márquez and Esperanza Fernández, Arcángel, like really like the best singers in Spain. And then I'm like telling you my whole life story here.
No, but that's what I want.
You asked.
I was telling them like, we know each other for so long, and then sometimes we don't hear those, we don't give permission to like tell those things, and then there are like so interesting tangents and connections and things. And that's sort of like the idea of like me kicking my butt into gear and getting to interview all these amazing people that I know to tell their stories. And people are at home, so they will have to watch or listen or do their dishes and hear Tamar stories, because I find even from this idea of like idea spreading and like viruses sometimes, right? Like even like showing one little hook, like sometimes someone is in, like, again, as you were like, oh, I mean, I want to have like this normal life, or in this case, like, and then going to biology or I studied physics, Demi studied physics, like a bunch of people like were in that. And, oh, there is a way to get into like the music of the world from whatever hook you were into. So I think it's always interesting to get the stories. We think our stories are not interesting,
Yeah.
but it will be sometimes, even if they're the inspirational legend for one person, it's already worth sharing it. So anyway, that's my hope.
That's so beautiful, Pedro.
I try my
Oh yeah, I
best.
forgot to say after university, before I went to Seville, I actually worked for 2 years in 9 to 5 in renewable energy, in green
How was
energy.
it?
Like, I mean, I learned a lot of admin stuff that I use to this day,
Right.
for coordinating projects,
Mhm.
like board meetings and MailChimp and like all these very useful admin skills, right?
Uh-huh.
And I coordinated a campaign with like Ontario Sustainable Energy Association and Environmental Defense and Greenpeace and the David Suzuki Foundation and all these things. And it was to increase feed-in tariffs, which is the money that people get if they have renewable energy sources like solar panels on their roof, the amount of money that they get when they feed that energy into the grid.
Right.
It was so low that it would take you like 100 years to make back your money. So it was like there was no incentive for people in Ontario to do it, because like why? So we increased the fees. It's called the Green Energy Act, and we like lobbied the government to increase those fees, and it passed. It took like 2 years, and then they offered me a promotion, and I was like, ah! And I ran away. I quit. I was like, I saw like the 10 years of climbing the ladder and like all this. Like it was like a beautiful place to work. I was in 401 Richmond where my flamenco studio was. So at lunch I'd like escape and practice in the basement. But like, it was like all these plants. Everyone was super nice. It's not for profit world. Like the morals were good. Everything was good. But I just like felt very fake in like the office setting. And so I had my like normal life that I wanted, right? I owned a car. I lived at like Queen and Bathurst. I like working 9 to 5. Like I had regular income, all these things. But then when I got offered a promotion, I like, because I started feeling very fake, like shaking people's hands and stuff. I was like, don't care. But really I had to be like, hi. Right. So when they offered me a promotion, I just got like anxiety of picturing myself in this world, like climbing the ladder for 10 years. And so I quit, I sold my car. And that's when I moved to Seville and studied flamenco full time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
It's
it was
like,
that.
okay, never mind. I'm going to accept my destiny as to be an artist. Fine.
Yeah. And well,
my mom was like, what? You said you'd never do this. No. Like, damn it. Like my inner child was like, you promised me you'd be normal. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, this is normal for me. I had an inner debate for a little while.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's so interesting you say this because, like, I guess, at least for my friends that stayed, like, I lived in a, like, somewhat, it's the size of Toronto, but somewhat smaller town, like in Brazil. And like my friends that are still like living there, like I don't know, lawyers or engineers or things like that, and they have, let's say, a more corporate, normal life. There is always this, how can you say this? Like when they fantasize that this artist life, also Pedro, you're this photographer and musician and this, and you travel and do this. And I'm like, yeah, and half of the time you don't know if you're going to be still living here or if can I pay my rent? And this month I can pay my rent for the year. Next year I don't know where I'm going to live and all those things. And a lot of like grants are not accepted or this, all sorts of like not glamour part of an artist's life. And in your case, it just reminded me this idea that we're sort of like always trying to escape those things, right? Like this, whatever reality we have, like, oh, you had like this traveling with your cool mom, and she is cool. So like, like that she has like all this experience.
As I grew older, she became cooler.
Oh, I see.
When I was a kid, it was like super embarrassing. You know what I mean? I'd be like,
sure. Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Bad. Yeah. But then as I grew older, I was like, when I was a kid, I was like mortified. They'd like play, like, we won this like CBC Radio Canada French award for one of the albums. I was in French. I was like in grade 3 or something, and they played it on the radio on the school PA, and I was just like mortified. I just wanted to like sink into the floor. And even in high school, I didn't really tell people like what I did in the summer. Like, what did you do in the summer? I'm like, nothing. You know. I also went to horseback camp, so sometimes I talk about that. But yeah, And then as I grew older, like it started to become cooler. People were like, what? You travel in the summers, you speak all these languages, you sing these things. Because I wasn't allowed TV when I was a kid, or like any like pop culture stuff, like nothing. So I really was like out of the loop as a kid, kind of with like TV shows or like no Barbies, like nothing that was like, I watched Lacho Drum like on repeat, I know it inside out. I know every scene.
Wow.
Like, I know every song. Yeah. So, so like, but when you're older, that's like suddenly cool. Everyone's like, oh, that's so cool that you had no TV. When you're a kid, it's not cool at all. Or they're like, oh, that's so cool that you traveled so much when you're a kid. When you're a kid, it's like not ideal. As you come back, all the social dynamics are changed and everything in your school, and you've been gone for like a month, and everything changes so fast when you're a kid. But then now it's cool. And like also when I was a kid, people would be like, you'll appreciate it when you're older. And I was like, no. And now I'm like,
older is in 100 years. I want now.
You were right. Yeah, exactly. That doesn't mean anything when you're a kid. But even though, it ended up to be kind of true.
Yeah.
Now, like, I feel like I can go anywhere. I can adapt to any situation. I can live anywhere and I'd be okay.
Yeah.
So
and so one thing that I wanted to know, like, because I know that like a lot of like Sephardic music and all like that influence came from like a lot of the work that I assume like that your mom was doing, and that got like infused into your interest. And of course you decided to like go for it. And that actually, especially the Toronto community, started broadening to like I don't know, Macedonian music and Balkan stuff and all the art and flamenco and all those other things. How was your interest in terms of music? Did it start before Ventanas, like the spread of interests, or was it something when you started the band?
I think so I started Ventanas when I moved back from Seville. So in like 2011, after I quit work, and then I went to flamenco school for a year, and then I came back and started Ventanas. And when I was living in Seville, I kept seeing all these pictures of the Toronto community of like all these people I knew from different places in the city, like in the same picture. I was like, what? I want to be in that picture. And I feel like I came back and I like dove into the middle of the picture. I'm like, hi, I'm in the picture now, like literally. Yeah. Because I had been playing, I had been dancing flamenco. So I was involved in the Toronto flamenco community. I had now been singing for a few years. I had also been playing maracatu in Toronto since around 2006, right? So it's like 14 years of maracatu. Yeah. And then with Alini and Alex, when it was the first maracatu group called it's called Nunca Antes. And then that was because a friend in high school, sister used to play, and she was like, you need to come, and you need to come. And she finally convinced me to come, and I just joined. So I was doing maracatu. I was in the flamenco community, and then also through Kensington Market and stuff, I'd met Tanguy and Oscar and Shemez. Shemez's wife dances flamenco. Shemez from La Palette and Drome. His wife dances flamenco. We used to throw flamenco parties at the old La Palette that used to be in Kensington Market. So all these people I knew from like different places. And when I was away, I started seeing them together. So in one picture, so I'd see like Shemez and Tanguy and like Dennis and Shirley from the flamenco world and like Alex from the maracatu world, like all in one picture. I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like everything's coming together. So when I came back, I realized this movement had begun in my absence called Fedora Upside Down, right? That also Mark, who I'm working with now with Urgent and Lemon Bucket, Dre and Tanguy had started. And the idea was to like merge all these communities. Like, so if, there was a flamenco show, not just flamenco people went. If there was a maracatu show, not just Brazilian people went. If there was a Ukrainian show, not just Ukraine, but if there was a singer-songwriter or jazz, like, so we started mixing all the communities, doing collaborations together, doing festivals, doing shows. And that movement happened for about 2 years. And it really that's where Ventanas was born out of. It was like Mark from Lemon Bucket, Dennis from the flamenco world, Josh, who I also knew from like the kind of Balkan Sephardic David Bookbinder world. I also knew him from before. And that was kind of the original crew. And then just when I was like, I need an oud player, because I grew up doing Sephardic music with my mom from Turkey and Greece and Morocco. And there's always an oud and a darbuka. And that's really like what I grew up as like, my mom plays some oud, and it was really like, it's like my favorite instrument. It's the king of all instruments.
And the sound of the soul.
Yeah. So I was like, I need an oud player in Toronto. You know, for me, like this kind of music it was never like cool. It was never my cohort. It was never my peers playing it. I was always playing it as a kid with older people. So in my mind, it was like not cool at all. So when they came back and this movement started and this music was suddenly like in the streets, like I remember meeting, like there was like a big party on the street on Queen Street. We shut the street down after a party at La Palette, and then everyone's playing like Balkan rhythms and stuff. I was like, what? My mom also does Balkan dancing, and I'd been going to Balkan dancing with her since I can remember. So they were playing all these Balkan rhythms. I'm like, what the hell? And I met Josh was like sitting on the curb, and I was like, play me at fast 7/8, and he's like, okay, you know, and I started singing La Comida, La Mañana, which is like a song I'd sung with my mom, and that was kind of like the first song that like Ventanas played, and to me it was unbelievable that like people like who were my peers and my friends and stuff like that were playing this music that I'd always grown up with thinking of like has nothing to do with my peers and friends and cohort, right? So I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and so Ventanas was created, just when I needed an oud player, I was like, guys, we really need an oud player who's like young and cool and like really good, and preferably from Greece or Turkey, because she'll know all the repertoire, right? And the rhythms and stuff like that. And then one day Josh was like, oh, I think I know one of those. And he called Dimitri.
Yes.
Right? It's just cool because you just interviewed him.
Yes.
And he came into my kitchen. I remember he brought his oud. I'm like, oh, hi. And he just started playing. I started singing, and it was like immediate. We're like, yeah, perfect. You know, and then that sort of was the initial group of Ventanas. And that lasted around 2 or 3 years in that configuration with those people. We made our first album that we recorded in Rob Tehan's basement. He's like a film composer now who lives in LA. And, but like, I bought him his first speaker system in exchange for like recording that album in his basement.
It's awesome.
So we did like a GoFundMe campaign, and then so that's kind of where my like current Toronto arts and music scene and community was really like cemented or like really born. And when I came back from Seville, studying flamenco, and founded Ventanas during this whole Fedora Upside Down movement. And through that, like all these other things, I've toured across Canada, I've toured the States. We're supposed to go on a tour this summer to Europe. Like we'll see, maybe next summer.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's how I started doing plays. Okay, I'll let you ask, and then I'll.
No, that's great. Yeah, that's exactly what like just a free flow of this.
Cool.
That's history, and that even reminded me because I think I met you in 2014, I think, the first time, and it was because I went to this because I was playing darbuka, but just Arabic, like music, and then Josh Singh, like a very, very cool percussionist in Toronto, he ended up going to this belly dance party at this belly dance place, and I was just drumming by myself. And then he decided to join, and then we were like just vibing, playing for the dancers and everything. And then he said, oh, you should come check out this band that I'm part of, Ventanas. And then I saw what you were doing that was like, oh, they're doing this music that to me, like, as you mentioned, like, oh, okay, Balkan music. I had heard some stuff, but not really, you know? And that reminds me, something that is, I think it's amazing. Okay, I keep talking all the time about like how cool it is in Toronto that we have this, especially I guess after 2009-10, that started this boom of people just getting together and playing different kinds of music and from all over the world. It's very cool. I think one thing that I always noticed all around the world is sort of like we have the music that we were born with, like from our country, and then we like American music and British music. We have the pop things that we have, and we don't really venture into other things. And I think sometimes it's because of the lack of context, right? Because music is not just, okay, now let me go into a history of the music of Poland. It's one thing. Another thing is what you did. What does it mean to be in 7/8, for example, right? It's like, oh, it's this weird beat that you're not used to. But then when you have like a whole party where everybody's dancing and drinking and having having fun, you are introduced to it in a different way. And I think what you said about being like, what is cool, I think it's a very important element, right? Because sometimes you get into certain things because it's what everybody listens to, right? You go, I get impressed. Like right now I am in Kiev, and then I go where people primarily do not speak English, for example, and you go to the shopping mall and there is music from Katy Perry or whatever. I happen to think Katy Perry is cool, but why are you listening to this repertoire specifically when you have all this breadth of music? And I think it's just a matter of context to be introduced. So I think like with Fedor,
well, it's also a matter of a lot of money and marketing.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? These traditional, you know, musics in like, you know, a village in Turkey or something. Sorry, they're not going to have the money to like get that music played in their mall in Kiev. But Katy Perry has the money and the backing to get her music played there. So that's a lot of it, I think. Having done a little bit of, you know, I did a program a couple of years ago at Canada's Music Incubator in Toronto, artist entrepreneurship program that I got a scholarship for, and it was like really an insight into the pop music industry. It changed. A lot of people in the world music industry think that pop music industry or rock or the popular music industry is like all evil and all they care about is money and image and all this stuff. Basically, that's kind of like the underlying feeling, I think, and you're a sellout if you do it and all these things. But actually attending this program, I was like, oh, actually, everybody in this program also wants to produce good music, not just in the program, but in the industry, wants to produce good music. Their opinion of good music is different from that of world musicians, right? That's all. It's a matter of opinion. And because so many more people think that is good music or are exposed to it, you know, the market is bigger. It's not because somebody's good or bad or anything. It's just a matter of what you think is good music, right? Because everyone was like, the goal is always the song, and to make the song good, we're only going to promote it. We're going to market it if the song is good. If the song is good, and I was like, well, what makes a good song, right? Yeah. Always the question. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just food
also who is listening to and who's nodding.
Yeah, and who has the exposure to it? Because if you've never heard anything, if you've never heard something, if you've never heard a 7/8 rhythm, it's going to sound weird to you. But if you hear it 10 times, 20 times, we're creatures of habit, and familiarity really makes us think that we like something or leads us to like something. You know, if you see the same person every day, you know, in the end, you'll probably be friends just because you see them every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, hugely important. So if you play a song over and over again, it causes that familiarity. I mean, even I've watched like Max Martin is one of the biggest songwriters in the world. He's written like hits from like Hit Me Baby One More Time, Britney Spears, to like Days hits with Ariana Grande and Katy Perry also. So 20 years of writing hits like back to back, you know, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Spice Girls, like all the major hits he's probably had a hand in. And one of his like songwriting tips is like, or rules of thumb, I guess, is that you use the first you use the melody that you're going to have in the chorus, you use it as the verse, right? Maybe you change something, like you drop a different beat, you change the words or something like that. But by the time you get to the chorus, and you drop the chorus within the first 50 seconds in today's like, you know, no attention span world. So by the time you get to the chorus, you've already heard the melody in the verse. Even if you don't realize, the average person isn't going to maybe realize that. But so you're already familiar with the melody, so you're like, oh yeah, I like this. I feel like I heard it before, you know. You're already predisposed to like the chorus, and therefore like the song, but just because of familiarity, you know what I mean? So I think, anyway, I don't remember why we're talking about this, but I think that has a lot to do. So if you play the same music over and over again, and if you play something new from a different culture you've never heard before, it's going to sound weird. But if you hear it a bunch, it starts sounding normal. You start liking it.
I haven't never thought about it from the engineering point of view of engineering music. I mean, like the songwriting element from like pop like point of view. It's very, very cool. And like there's a lot of like pop music that I really like. And if you think even like very simple folk songs that survive 200-300 years, right? They are sometimes very simple to play, and it's not about they have a catchy melody. And one of the things that I noticed, I don't know, probably you have this too, but like sometimes you start listening, let's say I start listening to let's say Serbian music, and then someone goes into, I don't know, like Gusta Mi Magla, stuff that you sing a lot, and everybody like, it's sort of like one of those songs that is very easy to, I think it's Serbian, right? Yeah. And they get like, and then all the people that have listened to this for a long time, to them, it's like playing Stairway to Heaven again. Please no, like that kind of stuff, right? And I was thinking how even like in the Arabic music, you have like those mushahats like Lama Bati Apatana, or you have like all this like cool music that whenever you hear for the first time, because the melody is so powerful, or like the structure, something about the music is so cool, you really hook even people that are not into like world music, you say, oh, that's such a beautiful melody.
It's very repetitive, right?
Yeah. And
so you
then,
get used to it quickly.
Yeah. And then there are songs that are really like, I find that, I don't know if you actually want to run this idea by you, because I don't know. Like, I was thinking that it's very much to do also with your experience, very related to food. Like, if you only ate food of one specific thing, suddenly someone gets you, or do you want to eat some sushi, or do you want to eat this, I don't know, whatever other thing from different culture, you will find much more difficult to deal with the tastes and what to expect than if you're already used to tasting from everything. And I find like this, like, let's say mixture, not mixture necessarily, but this spread of different cuisines around the world is happening a little bit ahead. That's my optimistic view, a little bit ahead of the music part. You know, like we're starting to have, like, you go to Brazil, and then people start listening to, like, besides, let's say, Brazilian music, and besides like American music and some rock and roll, you will start listening a little bit of, let's say, folk from Celtic bands from this place, or even on heavy metal things, there's some heavy, more like folk metal things. So what's this? Oh, someone's playing hurdy-gurdy. So you start being introduced to these other things, and then when you hear like a band that is basically world music stuff, it's like, oh, I've heard this. You have some way to get hooked into, like, from something that you have familiar. I don't know, something that I was thinking about, like this relationship.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. Why food is getting adopted quicker throughout the world. I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe because necessity. We have to eat every day. We don't have to listen to music every day. We'll die if we don't eat. We won't die. I mean, we'll die. Our souls will die. Yeah. But we won't die if we don't listen to music. So maybe that's why it's faster.
Yeah, yeah. It could be also one thing that I've been thinking, because I was talking to Danny about this, and I was talking before even to Judith. That is, people can check on the podcast too. That's just an audio, but he was talking about, he's basically reconstructing instruments from Ukraine, from old times. And one of the things that both he said that happened in Ukraine, and they happened in Brazil, I know, and they happened also in the Arabic world, and as far as I know, it happened in Greece as well. That was, the music that was traditional was actually suppressed. And they said, oh no, we're going to play, like in the case of Greece, was like, we're not going to play any Turkish stuff. We're just going to play just what, quote unquote, pure Greek. Yeah. In Ukraine, Judith was even telling me, like, the original bandura had a different scale, different construction. Oh. Yeah, and the one we have now is actually the Soviet one. So the main instrument of Ukraine, the way it's played, is with like very Western scales and all this. So there is sort of like control of identity through music that I think
definitely it can be very nationalistic.
Yeah,
for sure.
But that actually reminds me something that we can talk to go back into your story. That is, I guess this happened with Sephardic music, but in a very cool way, right? Like that you have music that started in Spain, and then with the migration, it started going other places. So it started adapting things from those cultures, right? Or you start putting a song in, like in Morocco, and then it has one specific beat, and then the same song in Turkey will be in 9/8 or in 11 or something. Can you talk a little bit, even for people just having in mind that sometimes people will not know what Sephardic music is? Can you talk a little bit about that? That
yeah, of course. So just quickly, Sephardic music is the music of the Jews who were expelled from Spain in 1492 during the Great Inquisition. And the Iberian Peninsula used to be called Sepharad. So people from Sepharad were Sephardim. The Sephardic Jews, okay, are the Jews from Sepharad. Okay, so when they were expelled from Spain, they moved, some converted to Christianity, and that's a whole other story. But they migrated to Morocco, a lot of them, Greece, Turkey, and the Balkans primarily. Okay, so all of those around the Mediterranean regions. That's actually the music my mom was studying a lot when I was a kid, and why I went to those regions. We'd go to old age homes and villages and try and find people who sang very old Sephardic songs, and record them before they passed away, and record that music and then learn it and then perform it as a way of preservation. Again, not cool to go to old age homes when you're like 8 years old. Cool now to talk about. I had to be very quiet. They pinched my cheeks a lot. I read a lot of books. I read like The Lord of the Rings, all of them in like one summer. And like, okay, I made a lot of friendship bracelets. There were no phones. We hitchhiked, we took buses. My mom had like a stack of bus schedules like that. And she'd like be filtering through them. We'd have to go to like the village bar, use the phone to call the next village bar and like ask if Maria was there, and they'd go to her house and they'd see. Anyway, this is complicated travel. But
Wow.
Anyway, all that to say, so I'm sure it was even more complicated in 1492, okay, when the Jews got expelled. And they went to all these places. So with them, they brought an old form of Spanish, the Spanish that was spoken at the time, obviously. And it's now referred to as Ladino, which is actually literally the written form of the Spanish that the Sephardic Jews speak. It's written in Spanish written in Hebrew characters, but now it's kind of, and each country had its own dialect. So it would be called different things like Judeo or Espanol or Judeo-Espanol, or in Morocco it's called Hakedia. But now people just use Ladino to refer to all of those dialects, and in general the language of the Sephardic Jews, which is, if you understand Spanish, you can pretty much understand it. There's different pronunciations, different words, and in each country they would borrow different words and expressions from that country. Just, humans being so adaptive, that's what we do. If you're living in Brazil for 500 years, you're going to start using Portuguese words. It's just going to happen, right? Even if you are a different community. So they so in like Morocco, they would use Arabic words, and Turkish words. And then the same thing happened with the music. So whatever music and stories they came with. So you can find the same ballads, the same romances, the same stories in a lot of the songs in different countries, but the names have changed in the story, the name of the king or whatever it is. The melody has changed, and the rhythm has often changed. Okay, so that maybe the same story will be told in 7/8 in Greece or Turkey, and then it'll be told in 6/8 in Morocco, which is more Moroccan rhythm. Or maybe it'll be like a free-form ballad in another place, or you know what I mean? Or a slow 7/8, less noto in the Balkans, sort of adapted. And so same with the melodies. So that's why Sephardic music sounds often so Arabic, because it was so influenced by Arabic makam in these countries that they moved to. Do you know what I mean? And then they use local instruments. So they would use the oud, the darbuka. So it's a lot of similarities to Arabic music because that's where they were living. So it just makes a lot of sense. And that's also the food that they made. So Sephardic food is like, it's not all across, like it just depends on the country. There are a lot of similarities, right? But then just with influence from living in the country, their food, the language, the music, the rhythms, would all, like you said, context, right? They would all kind of infuse the Sephardic culture and tradition and musical repertoire. And that's what you hear today. It's sort of like a mix of like the archaic stuff with like what was happening in the country. Or they would take a melody, might say the same in all those places, but then they would put different words on it. So that happened kind of all at the same time. So Sephardic repertoire is really related, although it has a lot of links, and the base of the language is still Spanish. And some of the stories are the same, some of the melodies are the same in all these different countries. It's been over 500 years, right, since that emigration happened, expulsion happened. So things have changed and really adapted. So it's really related to the country that they're in. So you have Turkish Sephardic music, you have Moroccan Sephardic music, you have Balkan Sephardic music, and really you can hear the roots of each culture like infusing Sephardic music. Yet it has those links, and it's still all Mediterranean, right? So there are still like people would still travel, move around, and influence each other. So there's a lot of links still, and that's also the link that we're hearing with flamenco. People often think flamenco and Sephardic music was like is like the same or a lot of similarities. But if you think about it, the Roma, or the Gypsy people in Spain and Portugal, they just say Gypsies, and in the Balkans they tend to use Roma. But if you think of Rachodrom, their migration from, or this way, I guess, reverse, from India, from Rajasthan through Europe into the south of Spain, and that was like in the 1500s maybe, and the Jews were kind of going the other way, so they might have crossed paths and indirectly influenced each other, right? But it's really like opposite migratory routes.
Oh, interesting.
So
I hadn't thought of that.
They would definitely have influences, and the Gypsies or the Roma would have picked up influences along the way from each of those countries that they went through in the northern shores of the Mediterranean. Do you know what I mean? And then there's influence, of course. The Moors, the Arabs lived in the south of Spain for 900 years. And were kicked out at the same time the Jews were kicked out. 1492. So, and they came up from the south, from Africa, you know, from
Right.
northern Africa up into Spain. So there's like all these convergences happening in flamenco, and that influenced the way that it sounds. And at the same time, the Jews were leaving and bringing the sound of Spain with them to the east. So there's a lot of like crossover, and mixing of cultures, kind of like, you know, today in Toronto a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's why they might sound similar, but they were never, to my understanding, in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Kind of like reverse effect.
Yeah, interesting. And so let's.
And those are my two specialties. Those two.
Right.
worlds.
Yeah. The cool thing I mentioned first, like I was gonna get into like flamenco like next, but just to mention this thing with the Sephardic music that I find so fascinating is, besides having the music being beautiful, and then you can have this, let's say, interpretations across the centuries that is like of same motifs and things that are very interesting. I think it's very cool because of the, let's say, how the Jewish community stayed connected, and they didn't like disperse and got like completely assimilated in their different cultures. They kept that thing, and so it's like it's a living representation of something that sometimes gets forgotten in other places of the world. And I find, like, one thing that I was talking to Demi, how sometimes people are so obsessed, especially with nationalistic tendencies and things like, oh, this is from our land and we are the best and all those things. And when you get examples of like with Sephardic music, you can see that there is this, we get things from different cultures and we still make it our own, and we remember our ancestors, but it's a dynamic thing. We're not just saying it's going to be rigidly how it was in a certain time and fixed, but we're letting things get introduced. And I think it's the best way to show sometimes that, I think it was Amir Ali from the Aga Khan Museum one day I was talking to him, and he said, I have to give like the kudos to him, because he said the best phrase I've seen, because we're talking about, oh, this instrument is from this place, but it actually, if you look historically, it was influenced by this other one. And he was saying that the only thing pure is the mixture. And
I like that.
Like,
well, also, if you think about it, in the past, we didn't have recording devices. So if you heard a song, you might remember it wrong. You might remember it differently the next time you sang it. So it would naturally change. Even if it's one note that changes, if it's one note every time, you know, or one phrase every time, then the song will change over time, just because broken telephone kind of happens over the centuries, right? Now it's easier to preserve things and like try and keep them exact and stuff like that. But then, I mean, things are always going to change.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's evolution.
And that's one of those things that, like, maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, it's interesting, this point of the, like, crossing migrations, but when you have, like, flamenco music, right, that started, like, sort of, like, in Spain and everything. So can you break a little bit down of a flamenco, like, for people that, let's say, maybe they heard that there is a guy singing, and then a girl singing, and then there is, like, someone playing guitar, and there is a dancer, and lately there's a cajon or other instruments. So let's get a little bit into that.
Yeah. So like I said, flamenco originated sort of, the roots of flamenco are often traced back to northern India, Rajasthan, and the migration of the Roma from there. And they moved through Europe, through Turkey, through Hungary, through the Balkans, into Italy, into France, and down into Spain. There was also, like I said, the Moors that were in that area for a very long time, and come up a lot in flamenco verses. They talk a lot about these things. And also, like, local Spanish folklore was there, a lot of rhythms and threes that you find throughout Spain. And flamenco is really from the south of Spain, Andalusia. It's not from the north. Franco, the dictator that was in Spain until 1975, really used flamenco as like a unifying force to present to the world, like as a branding, as an image. This is Spain, flamenco, you know, bullfighters. You know, and the people in the north were like, what? That has nothing to do with us. They have like bagpipes and stuff in Galicia. You know, it's really Celtic influence. Okay. And then in Catalonia, it's like a different language. They speak, in, like, where Barcelona is, they speak Catalan, and they're like more Phoenician influence and like very international port to the rest of the Mediterranean. And then in Basque country, they speak another Euskadi that's like, people don't even know where that language is from. So there's like a lot of very different cultures in Spain. Really, flamenco's in the south. In Andalusia. So all these influences happened and resulted in the first time flamenco was actually dubbed flamenco in like a newspaper, like published, was only in 1852. So as music goes, as traditional music goes, it's like relatively new. You know, my mom's a medievalist, so that's like considered very modern. Okay, 18.
Huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was really first in people's homes. It was really in the marginalized society, like the Gypsy Roma society that lived in like literally on the wrong side of the river in Seville, in a town. The other side was called Triana. There was no bridges. They couldn't get into Seville. They'd have to go around. It was like the slums, kind of the ghettos, really poor, marginalized societies. Also in Granada, they still live in the caves facing the Alhambra. Now some of the caves have like electricity and stuff, but it's still like the side of a mountain caves that the Gypsies of Roma were living in. And so kind of all along, like really like the train route from like the top of Andalusia to the south, Jerez, Cádiz, all these major flamenco places. So it started in people's homes as like a family would gather and everyone would sing, Ale, aza, aza, right? And then it's really, the base of flamenco is really the song and the body. So what you can do when you have, think about it, if you don't have a lot of money, you're not going to be buying a lot of instruments, right? You're going to be getting food for your family. So whatever you have, you don't need anything for flamenco, you just need yourself, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be in a gathering, informal normally, and it's very individualistic. So one person sings at a time or one person dances at a time because it's a lot of improv. There are general rules and forms, and within those forms, it's a lot of improv, traditionally speaking. Okay, now it's like a world stage and group choreographies and all these things, also amazing. But if you trace it back to the traditional roots, it's like in kind of like a circle. Think people are sitting around a kitchen table kind of thing, like a lot of folk music, right? Mm-hmm. And then one person like starts singing, and another person gets inspired, gets up and dances. Okay, and then maybe next person, everyone, ole, okay, at the end of it, and it can last all night in one rhythm. There's no beginning and end of the song. It's like you're within a rhythm, like you're in a 7/8. And once you're in that rhythm, you can just go, go, go. Every singer will have their own repertoire of verses. Every dancer has their moves. Every guitarist has their, falsetas, their string of melodies. And how you put them together like a puzzle is like different every time. And it can go on for 5 minutes or it can go on for 5 hours. We'll see. And then you can maybe change rhythms, do the same thing in the next rhythm. Okay, so as things started getting more modern, people now have like flamenco songs, and they build them more like pop songs with like the verse and the chorus and the bridge and all these things. But traditionally it's just like verses, standalone verses in a rhythm, and you can insert them anywhere, and the next singer can insert a verse, and it can be in any order that you want, traditionally speaking. And like the opposite to pop music, which is so interesting, is like a big compliment in flamenco is if you write an original verse and nobody knows that you wrote it, because it sounds so normal and so traditional that you've succeeded in creating something that like looks like it was always there, In pop music, it's like you're successful if everybody knows you wrote it, right? It's like the opposite. It's very interesting.
Oh, interesting.
But a similarity that I found in pop music and flamenco is that it's they're both written to be very personal and very general. So you can hear any pop song, there's always exceptions, but in general, you hear a pop song, it could be about anybody, but you can think of it about you. Oh my God, I loved him so much, and then he left me. So generic, but you can identify with it, right? Mm-hmm. And flamenco is like a lot of the same idea. It's like very generic, verses like, oh, I ran away from my family to be with you, and then you left me, right? But once you sing it, it becomes personal, and that's where you get the emotion. You like it, and everyone adapts it and makes it their own, even if you're singing generic verses. So anyways, all that to say, the base of flamenco is singing, dance, rhythm, a lot of rhythm, and encouragement, which is called jaleo. Ole, vamos, toma. Okay, and then maybe there's like a guitar that is a descendant of the oud. Okay, and that's really all that flamenco was originally. There was in the 50s a guitarist called Paco de Lucia that brought in the cajon, like you said. It was originally Peruvian traditional instrument. I think the story goes that he saw some guy on the street in Peru playing the cajon. He was like, that's amazing, let's bring that in. Yeah. And so that changed the face of flamenco worldwide. He also toured a lot and played with the Beatles and all these things, and made flamenco very well known. And he also brought other jazz instruments and influences. He was the first to kind of have a flamenco band with harmonica and bass and drums and all these things. and that's sort of like started flamenco fusion, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's great.
Now there's
That's
dance
perfect.
schools everywhere. Oh, and flamenco also has a lot of influence from the Americas, right in the Spaniards. Also in 1492, a lot happened in that year. When and conquered the Americas, they would bring back, songs and language, everything, rhythms from. There's a subgenre in flamenco called cantes de ida y vuelta, songs of coming and going. That's like colombianas, obviously influence from Colombia, guajiras, influence from Cuba, milonga, different things influence from the Americas. So it's also like a mixture of things.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's one thing like that's very cool. Like that was a very compact and nice version of like what flamenco is. And I think one of the cool things, like you were talking about being so personal, one thing that I think for people that will listen to it and will have like what I want to have for this show is to have like a Spotify playlist with like your songs or things that like you think people should listen to, and then people can get like a taste of how it sounds. But like one of the things that I always found like so interesting in flamenco, that it was like the way the cante, the way that the singer sings, that you're saying so personal, and it's all about the emotion. And sometimes they're, as you're saying, like it's so cool that they're like creating sometimes the lyrics even on the spot. And it's something, this is so ancient, right? There is even stories of like, I don't know, in Mesopotamia, people like telling tales and inventing things. And the fact that people would think that it's traditional, it's sort of like, oh, you hit the zeitgeist, you hit the universality of that, right? And you're in that group. But can you talk a little bit about the specific way that is sung? Because that's like, there is the flamenco way of like singing, and I don't know if that's like, that's actually, I actually don't really know if it's a technique thing, if it's a scale thing, if it's a mood, it's a way to project, or how does that work?
Well, I think a lot of people, so many questions. It's a lot in the fruit. No, it's good. Now you'll have to ask a musician a bit more, but a lot of the flamenco scales are in Phrygian mode. So you get what sounds like, right? Which also, I think my understanding is that it's close to Hijaz a lot in the Makam. Okay. And that's called the flamenco cadence. Flamencos call it the flamenco cadence. And so it gives kind of that sad, that low second, that flat second. It's not a major scale. So happy. There are some like alegrías. There are some flamenco stuff in major, but a lot of it's like right, that like minor sounding kind of. So that's very common in flamenco. What was it? Oh yeah, the technique, I guess, of flamenco.
Yeah, like what?
I mean, that's debatable.
So difficult. Oh, okay.
I think the biggest thing in flamenco is that you make it personal and you put emotion in. So instead of singing like la 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 la, however that comes out for you, you have to infuse, or you can be happy, la 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 la, right? Or but think if it's a marginalized people, often a lot of hardship. So it's normal that they maybe were a little bit not as happy. Although it's also for parties. Oh my God, okay. It's very emotional. It's not really, a lot of people ask me if I'm dancing or I'm singing, like, what's the story you're telling? I'm not necessarily telling like a story from beginning to end. It's more about like what the emotion in the moment. So some rhythms are like sadder. They talk a lot about death. Some talk about like love and the loss thereof. Some are like happy. Oh, the girls on the street are so pretty. Okay, so it's like more like emotional, bubbles, I guess. Because you're really infusing emotion in flamenco, and that is considered more important than being perfectly in tune, which to me is very interesting. In other cultures, it's not, right? You want to be in tune. Like
which is what appeals to me in flamenco and all the other things. It's like you're trying to be like something like more authentic and not worry that much about the like quote unquote perfection, which is sort of like a way to hide as well. But
the perfection in flamenco is the emotion and the rhythm, right? So if you're not in the rhythm, it's also like failure. Okay.
Yes.
It's like there's no point. You can do all this complicated stuff. You can sing in tune, but you're not in the rhythm. So what's the point? So same with dancing, with singing. So it's a lot about the rhythm and the emotion. Then you can have a thing called quejío. It's like you're almost like crying. Right? You're like crying, like actually crying for a second. Quejío, that's a technique in flamenco. And then it's also like you project from, it's almost like your voice is in front of you. It's not like, okay. And it's not head voice. It's like, some people call it throat or chest voice, but like really your whole face. Instead of, right? So that's like some of the things. There's like a debate, of course, like some people want more raspy voices, and some people consider that to be more like the authentic gypsy way of sounding, like you're more raspy. Some people have in Huelva, they're like a lot more floreo, like those decorations. Some people like really strain their voices, right, to get like that raspy sound, or they smoke a lot or drink a lot. So I've tried different things over the years, and in the end, I just like try and sing it how I like it the most. So if you have taken influence from like Sephardic ornamentation, or like Balkan ways of singing and different things like that, and just kind of like now I've made it my own, which I think is also very flamenco, because you're supposed to make it your own, right? So
yeah, and that's actually the point we're getting to the end, because I know you have to go work. But one thing that is sort of like on a more personal level, like because I don't think in outside of a podcast or video like a situation I would be able to ask you this, unless we're really drunk after like parties and stuff. But
no, you can ask me.
I would have thought about at least asking you this. But one thing that I noticed, like whenever I go into certain cultures, like we always try to imagine what it was like in certain contexts. Again, going back to that idea of context, like how would it be to like play this music at night in a cave, or like having very big, like a big hardship that if you don't play tonight, you may not eat, or like someone stabbed you, or like whatever thing was happening in a person's life. And you hear the emotion that is from people that, and of course, emotion is a universal thing. You don't need to go through complete hardship to like feel things. But at the same time, one thing I notice as I get older is like, and you go through something in your life, and that not only reminds you of a song, but you're like, oh, I get it. Now I get it. Or like you go perform with that sometimes rage or sadness or something. And for you as a singer, it's probably even more evident, because you're trying to portray, right? You want to be the mirror to this thing that is bubbling inside. So did you have an experience like on your like years of singing like flamenco and even the like Sephardic music, that you're like, you heard this before, a certain emotion, and now you actually internalize and get it from like the experience you had?
Yeah. I mean, you can always use, everyone has heartbreak in their life that you can use to sing. In fact, you know, Dennis, my guitar player, the original guitar player in Ventanas, used to tell me I sang better when I was upset. It's like, it's good that you're upset today, because I'll sing better. I'm like, whatever. But you can imagine. But yeah. I mean, people say flamenco is a way of life, so it's not just about hardship. It's like the way you do everything, the way you feel things, the way you experience things, how you're always in it, kind of in flamenco. But and Sephardic music is more about, you're like a storyteller. So it's not really about your personal emotion. You're just kind of conveying a story unrelated to you. So it's very different in that sense. Flamenco, I guess, I mean, an interesting thing that happened to me in flamenco school is one of my teachers said that since I wasn't from there, I'd never be able to sing flamenco. And that happened in like the first month of like a 10-month program. I'd never be able to sing flamenco, and I shouldn't even try, and like just put me down so much. And it was like so upsetting. Also, I was like, then why are you a teacher in a school full of foreigners? But anyway, but it was like so heartbreaking, because I'd been dedicating so much of my life to this, and like I thought of myself as a singer, and it really hurt me in a lot of ways. But then and we were learning like one of the deepest flamenco styles called seguidillas, which is a lot about pain and death. And I ended up infusing that, like, and I went home crying like for 2 days. I'm like so upset. And I just, when I was singing that piece, I would just think like, you just use that kind of hurt and pain that my teacher had inadvertently given me, kind of, and converting it into song. Like I was so upset that I was like crying while I was singing this song. And maybe that's not what the song is necessarily about, or the style, you know, it's more, talks about death or heartbreak, but that I was able to use that pain, and it lasted me like until now. It was like almost 10 years ago, and it's still like, you know, feeds that
Still there.
style. So yeah, it wasn't like a huge event in my life, but it was definitely like an emotional impact that allowed me to, I think, sing the style better. I don't think that was her intention, but that was the result.
That's interesting. Yeah, like this happens whenever you are, let's say, quote unquote, other, like me, like that's one of those questions I heard from the beginning, and it's like, oh, so you're Brazilian? Yeah. You have so many drums in Brazil. Why are you listening? Why are you playing darbuka? And for Yana, like my wife, like, oh, you're like Ukrainian girl. You're not doing Ukrainian dance. You're doing belly dance, Persian dance. Like it's how it percolates.
It's hard for people to understand sometimes, and it's closed a lot of doors for me. They're like, oh, you're from Canada. We want a real Spaniard, or we want a real Sephardic person, or something like that. I am Jewish, but Ashkenazi, which is not Sephardic. So it has had its difficult moments in North America for sure, where they really don't understand, and they think that they just want to like write grants that say like, oh, we have a person from Ethiopia and a person from here and a person from there and a person from there, and you get discarded if you're not. It's a very interesting it's phenomenon.
The way that I put it is a cult of fake authenticity.
Yeah, it's not about like how good you are, how much you've studied, or how much you've lived in the culture. Because usually when you live in a culture and you study that culture, my teacher was an anomaly. Like usually the people are very like honored, and they love the fact that you're taking the time and the interest to really learn their culture, really live with them, really explore it, and then transmit it to the world on their behalf. Like most people are very honored. It's really people from the outside that judge, not people from the inside.
Oh, for sure.
So, but that's okay, you know.
Yeah. And I guess even when you think about it, it's like, even let's say the experience of most Jewish families is sort of like that, even in the Sephardic world, because they were coming to different places, and you're like, oh, you're other, you're not us, right? Yeah. So it always has that kind of thing. But we will teach them better one song at a time, right? So with that, one other thing, just to finish off, like let's get people to go to tamarilana.com, where else on Instagram, everywhere, and that's the hub, like that's the best place for people to go find your stuff, like your website.
There on Instagram, is both are good.
Yeah, you are one of those rare musicians that actually uses Instagram and uses social media, and like, let's put stuff out there.
So much fun.
Yeah, and so people can go there. We'll get some links to, you have 4 albums with Ventanas, right? Three albums with Ventanas. All right, the first one Ventanas, and the one in 2012, Arrelumbre, and the next one is last year, right? Yeah, great. So it's I highly recommend. People should go check it out.
Thank you.
Tamar, thank you so much for joining me. It was really cool. I'm glad to see you from afar, and hopefully we'll get out of quarantine and
oh my god, and play music together.
Yes.
Que pa que vea que bien yo te camelo, coge la senda y vente pa acá. I haven't sung in so long. I don't sing anymore. I'm stuck in my house.
Cool. So, Tamar,
thanks,
so
Pedro.
Obrigada. Let me stop recording, but I'll keep you here for a second.